Hi to all our Faithful to Nature customers. I'm just holding on for Zandi the mermaid, who's going to be joining us, Zandile Ndlovu. Just give me 2 minutes to get her on the line. Okay, we seem to be having some technical issues. Guys, please just hold on. Zandi's just logging in. Just to introduce myself, I'm Lorna Pretorius. I am the head of marketing for Faithful to Nature. There we go. Sandy seems to be joining us. Just waiting for her to join. Hello,
Hello,
Sandy.
hello, hello. Hi, hi, hi.
I'm so glad to get the technical issues sorted.
I'm
All right.
excited. Awesome, awesome. I'm glad we could get it sorted too.
Right, so let's just get started. So just to introduce myself quickly so that everybody knows who I am, I'm Lorna Pretorius. I look after the marketing for Faithful to Nature. And I'm going to introduce you, Zandi, but I don't want to actually steal your thunder. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we can take it from there.
My name is, hi everybody, number one. My name is Zandile Ndlovu. I'm a freediver. I'm a freediving instructor, South Africa's first Black female freediving instructor. I'm also the founder of the Black Mermaid Foundation, which is an organization that is working to create diverse representation in the ocean space. The question is why? We can't care for something that we've never seen. We can't care for something that we have no connection to. And so my work is just creating access to build that connection to the ocean so that we have an incredible army of ocean guardians. And my conservation work centers around access. And that's my story. And I do many other things. You could find me underwater, filming, so much, but conservationist.
Awesome. And actually, that's why we wanted you to join us today, because we're talking about our trends for 2023. And it's less about us as Faithful to Nature being the experts saying, these are the trends for 2023. It's more about things that we're seeing that we wanted to explore with experts like yourself. And we wanted to take our customers on a journey with us.
Yeah.
So really, one of the sort of, I guess, trends you could call it is the fact that we're calling BS on greenwashing. Because it seems that as much as, sustainability is a hot topic nowadays, unfortunately, everybody is trying, but some people are sort of taking it a little bit far and maybe greenwashing. And so we really just wanted to kind of explore that. And it's about educating ourselves and educating our customers along with ourselves. So I think on that note, let's talk about greenwashing. So I guess the first question really is, what is greenwashing?
That is the question that I got the most over Twitter and on Instagram. Greenwashing is when organizations or individuals say that they are environmentally friendly or they are sustainable, when in fact they are not quite. So it's a skewed idea of it, or it's a blatant lie, or it's highlighting one part of fantastic stuff while there's a big jar of really negative stuff. And so greenwashing is the moments when the consumer is unable to make an informed decision, when they think that they're being environmentally conscious, when that's not necessarily the case.
So, Zandi, if I'm hearing you correctly, transparency seems to be a really important theme in greenwashing. So, I guess, or when they're being transparent about certain things but not about others, which is sort of maybe not being completely transparent. So I think what would be really helpful is, let's talk about some examples of greenwashing, because I think that would be really helpful for people to understand exactly like how greenwashing can show up.
So I have 3 examples for us, perhaps starting with the blatant space of not being truthful, perhaps a skewed idea of it, and the portion aspect, right? So there was a vehicle brand a few years ago, and they lied about their carbon emissions, and they intentionally set out to deceive the consumer, right? And when they were found out, it was a whole big problem and nobody could believe it. How would they lie to us? But they had committed to numbers of carbon emissions that they would work against, and they were not meeting it, and they started lying, which was horrible. And everybody held them to the cross for it. And then you look at something like partial truth, a nappy brand saying we use organic cotton on the plastic of on the packaging.
Yeah.
When they use a small portion of organic cotton and the rest of it is pesticide laden cotton. So it's a partial truth that takes away from the greater truth. And
so an example of how they could be more transparent is to disclose the percentage, for example, of organic cotton that they use, as opposed to just saying we use organic cotton and not being clear about the percentage that is actually used.
100%. And you look at like your sweets, like I got sweets on the plane the other day and it said made from real juice, right? Real juice. And that might be 10% real juice, but they can make that statement even though it's not completely true.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for those examples. I think that's really helpful. So I guess the next question is, why do you think greenwashing is bad? Because we're all trying to be more sustainable. Companies are obviously trying to talk up what they're doing. So why is it potentially a bad thing?
I think there's two aspects to it, right? At any point when anyone lies to you, they don't give you an opportunity to make an informed decision. And I think that is the challenging part from a consumer point of view. It just says, you didn't give me the opportunity to make a better decision. If I knew better, I might have chosen differently. And we need to allow people the agency to make their own decisions. That's one. Two, the challenge with organizations and even bigger organizations lying about their environmental efforts is that we're all living on that same planet. We only have one planet. And so when anybody lies about their carbon emissions, they take us back instead of us moving forward. When we talk greenwashing, we're talking the climate crisis. We're talking global warming. And we're talking the intersectionality that meets all of those spaces. And so it is saying they rob the future generations of the potential future that they could have. They rob us of the inheritance that we can leave for our offspring. They eat at our planet. They're taking bigger chunks of this planet than they say, which means that one day we're going to wake up to a burning hot planet and we don't understand how we got there. If there's scientists that are measuring carbon emissions, that are measuring the temperature rising in the ocean, that are measuring the climate, the gases that we need to be controlling, but those numbers aren't true, we get to the worst of the effects of climate change quicker, which gives us less time to act.
And I guess that's the big thing, right? Because if we don't understand the scale of the problem, how can we solve it? And I guess that's where greenwashing becomes a problem, because that lack of transparency actually can hide the scale of the problem, which means we can underestimate the scale of the solution, potentially.
100%. And again, why does climate change matter? It won't affect everyone who has the option. It will affect the most vulnerable communities. And that's why I'm here saying, I want to call BS, because the people who don't have the option to move to higher ground, move to a different country, you cannot take away options or the ability to survive to people who are trying just to survive on the daily. And so from a humanity point, that's where I come in.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then moving on to our next question, And this is, I think, quite an interesting one. How can customers arm themselves with information to distinguish between real sustainability and greenwashing? That's hard.
It is hard, right? Because the question is what is true and what is not. But I think it starts with reading the packaging. So the packaging will often say something. We are sustainably sourced. We are organic. We are planting trees. We are, and they'll say we're planting trees in Madagascar, in Kenya, and on you when you go on their website, you should be able to verify that. But anything that, what I like to look for is a third party certification. I'm not saying I'm organic. They agree that I'm organic, right? So you want to look for that third party stamp of approval that says this is sustainability approved. You want to look for that. You want to see where your products come from. Locality matters. You know, it's great if your avocados are organic. It's hard if they come from Peru. And so we need that space of saying, what is my individual carbon footprint? Recognizing that, again, we have a global problem. It's not individual, but in the individual actions and individual accountability, we're able to make a creative collective change that is powerful.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, it sort of feels to me like this theme of radical transparency keeps coming through. And this idea of like the only way that we're actually going to address greenwashing is with absolute transparency and, you know, really providing customers with informed, you know, information so that they can make better decisions or, you know, or make whatever decision. But the point is, it all kind of starts with that transparency.
Yep. And I think that's how brands build trust, right?
Yes. And that's a really interesting one. And I think, you know, I think just as a collective consciousness, I think, you know, people are starting to kind of become more accustomed to the space of radical honesty and radical transparency. So I definitely think like there's a movement that's kind of moving towards it.
Yeah.
And I think brands need to, and businesses, you know, because brands are really just businesses at the end of the day, but I think they're facing it because the customers are asking for it.
And that's the beauty of the space of consciousness. It allows brands to know what customers want, and hopefully they're able to cater to that and care for that.
Absolutely. And then I guess the next question is on this topic of, because it's all very good and well understanding sort of greenwashing, like what is greenwashing, what isn't greenwashing. But often customers are also, and people, humans, right? Let's not call them customers, but people are looking for ways to be more sustainable. As a conservationist, I imagine that you have a lot of your own sustainable practices. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you make more sustainable choices.
I love this, and I wanna open up with something silly, but let's start here. I recently drank juice from, like, I think it was like cereals juice or something like that. But years ago, it was a plastic straw, but now it was a paper straw in a plastic wrapper in a Tetra Pak box, right? So it's this intersectionality of progress and challenges around the progress, right? It's a curious one. And so I had to sit and be like, oh, we're happy that they've moved forward, I guess. But then again, globally, the message that lands is don't use straws and don't use single-use plastic, which really, really matters. But it's such a curious one. Like, anyway, as I held that box, was just such curiosity in my head. So what do? I have a stainless steel straw and I have a glass straw. So I have a stainless steel straw that I move around with because I don't believe that we should be using plastic straws. When we reject them, then organizations know to not buy them. So that's how you break the cycle of decision making. You know, you vote with your money. I have obviously reusable grocery bags, which is fantastic because they're reusable. Reusable water bottle, reusable coffee cup. coffee cups, coffee lids, plastic coffee lids, families, plastic, you know. And so for me, it's always the space that says, what can I do today? I'm not perfect. I am human. If I come across a place and I can't find any clean water anywhere, I'm gonna buy, that bottle of water. We are human, we are fallible, but we are actively working to do better. And I think that is a messaging that I like to hold myself to, because when you look at climate anxiety, we don't want to be holding that level of anxiety every time we need to make a decision that might not be the best decision at that moment, but it's the best of what's available.
Yeah.
So it's continuously saying we're doing work, we're intentional, but there are moments when life happens.
And you know what, Zandi, that links so nicely, because we were having a chat earlier, and I think where we sort of got to was like, there's this balance between being conscious and making better decisions. And I think that's part of why we're trying to educate our customers and, just people in general around greenwashing. It's about education and knowing more and being conscious, and therefore having better information to make decisions.
Yeah.
But the check, like with that balance, is always, okay, I am a human, and let's kind of like give each other the grace to sort of, I guess, move forward and make better decisions. When you know better, you do better. Yeah. And I think it's, it's sort of that really nice balance between, and I love the fact that you're honest about it as well, right? Yeah. Is, you when you're able to, you are definitely going to make those. And it's not about, I think I've seen this sort of quote floating around to say, it's not about 10 people doing plastic free perfectly. It's about everybody kind of doing their bit and doing a little bit better. So there's not this call to perfection around sustainability. And I think that's also why we're wanting to have this conversation. We're not wanting to hold anybody to account or say you're greenwashing. It's about just arming people with information, increasing that consciousness, but not having it sort of result in like this insane anxiety, because that's also not going to move us forward, right?
100%.
It's about kind of like a more positive movement to move us forward, consciousness, about making better choices where you can, and trying to get more people to do that versus getting a small group of people to do it perfectly, because nobody is perfect, right?
100%. And I think that's just it. It's awareness and empathy. Awareness that says, I individually cannot make a change. We have a global crisis. And so if 1 million people stop using straws, we get to move forward. But again, it says, how are we holding corporates accountable to what they're putting out into the world? And I want to share something that always says, for me, conservation requires empathy and context matters. I love that. Simply, Tina is saying, only when you know better can you do better, which is power. I was at my grandmother's recently, and I want to share this because it matters. So the lady gets out of the taxi and she has groceries. She's been at the shops and she's carrying plastic bags full of groceries. And she gets on her phone and she calls, and very quickly kids come running up the road and they help carry these plastic bags. I don't know how far she had to walk to get home. What is the message in that moment? It says, I don't know how a plastic bag would be able to hold for her. I don't know how far she's walking. What does it mean to allow people a dignified existence? But then again, you're kind of like, as I watched in that moment, I recognized that conservation is important, but empathy matters as well. When you say reusable bags, you can have 2 reusable bags, but the cost of those bags, that matters as well. Does it take away from bread on the table for the kids? Yeah. So I love the space of empathy that says there is no one strong way of how we're going to show up. It says we're going to have empathy. How far did she have to walk? How much does that paper bag cost? 2 Rand versus 50 cents means that she can expand what she brings home for her family. And so how are we holding, again, consumer, citizen? How are we holding government and business accountable to bridging the gap of the green transition. How are we making
Yes.
that, how are we making that accessible to as many people as possible?
Brilliant. And, you know, I love the fact that you differentiate between customers and business, right? Well, and government, because it's sort of, there's those three groups, right? And obviously, like, you're going to have the best impact when all three are kind of doing their bits. And so I think, and that's also why we wanted to have this conversation around greenwashing, because it's, you know, when customers are empowered with information, they're able to do better from businesses. Businesses are economic entities, and they will, at the end of the day, listen to customers. So I think it's so interesting because customers actually have a lot more power than they think they do, especially collectively. And I think this also had this conversation earlier about collective, and it sort of links back to this. It's not about 10 people doing it perfectly. It's about more people doing it a little bit, you know, and I think it's that collective sort of action of like demanding better from business. And I think, you know, we're already seeing so many businesses stepping forward and starting to do more. And that to me is very encouraging and very exciting. And I think also what's really exciting to me is that, you know, you're seeing younger generations like, you know, and I hate to throw around terms like Gen Z and millennials and whatever, but it's language people use. And I think, you know, it's amazing to see how they are so much more aware of climate, and with them moving into businesses as well, they also have a voice, not just as consumers, but as employees. And it's amazing to see that kind of filtering through. So I personally feel very positive, but once again, it's kind of coming back to that transparency. And, you know, I think that's where business definitely has to kind of like step in, and where they can step in terms of being more transparent. Providing education, right? Because it's a lot to expect every single customer out there to go and educate themselves about this stuff. It's hell of a complex science. And so I think that is where businesses can help, you know, by having this conversation. That's where government can hopefully help as well in terms of infrastructure for recycling and that kind of thing. So it's very much a collective. Nobody is going to solve this on their own. Like, everybody has to come together, and the more people we can make aware of it, the more kind of we can create that movement, and, you know, people asking for change, and therefore businesses and governments delivering change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So actually, no, not the last question. Still got a few more questions to get through. One question that came from actually one of your followers, and I just love the way she framed this. She said, how can we create a measurable mechanism to evaluate information from corporations? Should we have a BS body, a bullshit body of some, and I love that. Because and somebody, as a business that works in this space, what I will say is that there's not a lot of legislation, right? So it is kind of a little bit the Wild West, because it's not overly legislated, and the onus really is on businesses to almost self-regulate in this space.
How dangerous is that?
This BS body that your follower suggested.
It's a hard one, because, I mean, you look at COP27, perfect example. If we're going to say there's a body that is keeping an eye on this to try and make sure that they protect the consumer and the planet, we've got leaders that meet every year, but there's lots of talk and not enough action. And so it's interesting, because I read something about greenwashing and climate change is about politics and policy. And one of the statements that I gave was, you know, greenwashing and climate change it's deeper than the surface level, just like diversity. When we say diversify the ocean, diversify the space, there are so many layers to it. And so at that moment, when we say policy, we say, oh, there's great stuff about companies need to do better. We want to see you commit to a percentage of, that you're going to do better in. There are policies, but who's holding these businesses accountable should they not meet their own targets? What's the organization that said 90% of the companies that have agreed to?
WGSN, and that's actually so interesting because you know, a lot of we were chatting about it earlier. So a lot of companies make promises about what they're going to do by 2025 or by 2030, whatever. And then WGSN, which is a trend business, actually went and researched this, and what they found was that only like 90% of, so only 10% of businesses that have made those promises are going to achieve them. 90% are not going to achieve the sustainability promises that they had laid out to their customers.
Exactly what Barbara is saying. There's regulation, but no oversight.
Yes, thanks.
It's so typical globally. Like South Africa, her policies, phenomenal. You could never touch her, but who's implementing those policies? And that's where we find ourselves. And I actually wondered are we at a place in the world where there's just too much information? Are we overwhelmed by the amount of information that there is? Are we overwhelmed by the conversations and no action? Like I look at Faithful to Nature. One of the things I love is you're online. Already that minimizes your emissions in the world, right? And so there's these moments where we're saying, okay, but what are we doing? And we can celebrate the small victories. Are we celebrating the small victories? Are we telling the brands that we love them? Are we applauding them when they make change? You know, in every single moment, just like when you give a dog a cookie and it does something right, and you or a kid, or everyone needs to know that they have cheerleaders behind them. You know, Denmark is doing incredible work when it comes to the climate crisis. Are we telling these governments that we're behind them? We know that they've got big, audacious goals, and we know that they might not be achievable, but the dream is beautiful and it's good to see them do it. You know, and we all love that affirmation, that trust, that journeying together. It's a human journey. We're human. And when we dream big. And it's beautiful to see the action towards it. We might not win, but it's in the effort and it's in the trying that there's possibility. So it's what we live for every day.
Wow, that's inspiring. I'm going to move on to the last question.
Yes.
So this one comes from Kyra, and the question is, how does greenwashing impact climate change? I think we did touch on it earlier, but this is a sort of slightly different take on it. So I'm just going to repeat the question. How does greenwashing impact climate change?
So if you look at, if a company says, we're going to lessen our carbon emissions by 20% by 2025, and then come 2025 and they don't, the problem is that their carbon emissions are still in the atmosphere. That atmosphere leads us to a heating planet. So we're like a blanket that is getting warmer and warmer and warmer. The effect of that is that ice is melting. The effect of that is floods, it's drought, it's heat, it's the climate crisis. So it's a whole thing that says just a big enough company not holding their end up to our agreement is that it destroys the planet. It destroys the planet. It brings the climate crisis forward. So if we're saying by 2042, we might get to 1.5 degrees above where we currently are, which would equals to more droughts, more floods, which means displacement of people, displacement of homes, loss of habitat for marine life and human alike. It means food scarcity. It means less access to fresh water. It means life as we know it will change. We already saw what happened over COVID-19 when there was a perceived inability to access basics. What happens when we truly can't access fresh water, food? We're a growing population. And so these are the things that matter. When we hold up companies to account, we're saying we want to guarantee that in the next 10 to 20, 50 years, our kids can have a dignified existence on this planet. And you're not going to take it away from us. Ultimately, that's what we're saying. not on your money, not on your profits, not on your time. We're going to hold you to account. And so when companies lie about their emissions, when they lie about being environmentally conscious, when they lie about how they source their products, they cheat us of a better tomorrow. They cheat the generations to come of what is their inheritance. We arrived on this planet with food and sun and water, and we're going to leave the generations to come with what? A burning planet? And that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves.
Wow. No, absolutely. And then last question. So what I'm going to do before I ask the last question is I'm just going to talk to our live audience and say, guys, if you have any final questions that you want to ask Zandi, please pop them in the comments now. And while I'm waiting for you guys to do that, I'm going to ask our last question. Do you have any tips or advice for people wanting to make more sustainable choices in 2023?
I would say no to single-use plastic. That's something that we already know, but I love to say it anyway. I would say buy local when you can. Buy local, support local businesses, because that means that the transport from your product to you, that travel is shorter, lessening the carbon emissions in the air. I would say Plastic-Free July comes up every single year. We're not saying it's only in July that you can be better, but there is a collective community around you to help you make those decisions that are better. It is not about perfection, it is about progress. And it is about normalizing a green way of living. And I would say be kind to yourself. We're human, we're changing, and we're trying to create a world that we haven't seen before, right? There's this whole industrial revolution that is moving in front of us. As a continent, we want to grow. And so there's always going to be the wrestle of analogies of how we live life, of how we show up. But I think it's the reminder that in the individual can be the collective. People do what they see us do. Speak to your family about it, chat to your friends, encourage everyone at work. You know, where you can, buy your friends coffee cups. Like when we...
That's my favorite, because everybody gets reusable cups.
you know, and it's powerful. Every single time when we go diving, after our dive, we will have coffee together and everybody brings their cups. When we say we're going to share a drink, everyone runs to their cars and they bring cups. And so just to be intentional and to be aware, recognizing that we can't change everything, but just that awareness brings us closer to a better tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Zandi. So I have been looking at the comments and I've seen some great suggestions coming through actually. Like it is Veganuary at the moment. Some people are suggesting Veganuary, like that you try it.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. I'm not seeing any questions though. So I think on that note, I'm just going to ask if there was anything else that you wanted to add before we finish off for today.
Yeah. Yes, of course. How can Faithful to Nature encourage small businesses and other businesses that are looking to become a bit more green? We know that you guys do a lot to be environmentally friendly, like being an online store, like sourcing locally, like carbon offsetting. And maybe you want to chat a bit about that, but what can other companies do in their aspiration to become more sustainable?
So I think the first thing that I would say is understanding your operations. And so really like, how much packaging are you using? Like, because if the devil really is in the detail when it comes to things like this, right? So, I mean, those are three big things that you've mentioned, but I mean, we also pride ourselves on, for example, trying to use as little plastic as possible in our warehouse. So the percentage is less than 1%. But the point is we were able to get to that point by understanding what we were doing first and being it. So I think it's very much around really going into the detail of every single aspect of your operations and understand where sustainable choices are available.
Yeah.
Packaging one that, because it's very visible to customers, and so often mention that, and there are a lot more sustainable options, biodegradable options, paper-based options that are coming available. So that's a good place to start. But it's often, there are lots of hidden places like back office, you know, where can you, and I think it's just really just go digging. And like, I think try and become a little bit more conscious. And also, if you don't have answers, ask your customers.
Yes.
And, you know, there are a lot of customers out there that are passionate about sustainability and that are advocates in their own right and that are quite educated and that are like have a lot of information and are dying to share that with brands. So use that resource, like have a conversation with your customers. Like if you want to know, and especially for small businesses, often small businesses really start by forming a community around their business or their product. Use that community, ask them, get them to help you and understand. So that's the one side, asking for help, and the other side of it, understanding exactly what's going on in your operations and where you can actually make a more sustainable choice. So yeah, that's kind of really what I would suggest. I mean, and there are lots of big fancy things like, you know, put in solar panels and all, which we might have to do because of load shedding anyway. And you know, that's great, but I think that often has quite a big cost impact, and a small business may not have capital available, but there are things to do that aren't capital intensive in terms of your day-to-day operations that are more sustainable. And start there, start small. You don't have to start.
And what you're pretty much saying is intention, right? So Barbara's saying that to be intentional in how you're going to move forward. And I have to ask you one question, and I think lots of businesses battle with that. I have gotten deliveries from Faithful to Nature. It's in a box, it's covered, and there's paper, it's box and paper, right? How difficult was it for you to move from plastic to a more sustainable way of packaging your goods when they go out for deliveries? How difficult was that? And what advice can you give to anybody who's trying to get to at least their packaging right? Like, that's the one thing that I hold highly in how you operate in your business, that box when it arrives. It's a reminder that we can dream differently and show up differently as business.
So I think it's definitely become a lot easier in the last few years because there are a lot more options available. And, you know, hats off to the packaging industry. I think they've really listened to customers and they're starting to make these options available, which is fantastic. And I will say that we have pretty much a zero breakage rate. I don't want to say that out loud because I'm sure that there is one customer who received a glass bottle that's been broken, and I apologize profusely. But everything is paper, and actually it really works. So you don't need plastic to, you know, to wrap the stuff. And I think a lot of it is just actually the creativity of our ops team on the floor. They've just, you know, they found ways to kind of like wrap stuff and make it work without plastic. And so hats off to them, you know. And I think there just are a lot of options available. And I mean, actually, even our tape is paper. So even the tape is recyclable, which is, and I think if you Google sustainable packaging, you'll start to see that there are a lot more options available. Cape Cup, for example, offers sustainable packaging. There's just tons of options available nowadays. So even for a small business, I would say definitely go paper-based because it's much more recyclable than plastic. Not all plastic is recyclable in South Africa. Really, and, you know, also talk to your courier partner, right? Because if you're and you use couriers, your courier partner may have sustainable bags that you don't even know about, and they just default to the normal ones. So I think questions, you know, like don't just assume that what you're getting right now is the only option. Just ask. Because I think a lot of courier partners are having the same pressures that we put on our courier partners to say, how are you reducing emissions? How we actually offset our emissions as well, in addition to working with our partners to reduce their emissions. But you know, but it all starts with a conversation and asking questions. I don't think any customers expect businesses to do this on their own. So
Yeah.
chat to your partner. And you know, there's so much information available online in terms of suppliers that are able to do this. So there really is a wealth of information out there for small businesses, just at the touch of a button. And you know, use your network as well. And guys, feel free to email the customer care team at Faithful to Nature. We will happily help.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's because a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So we want businesses be more sustainable as well. So, you know, we're really happy to answer. Like, I mean, you know, like reach out. We'll see what we can do to help.
I have to put this in the chat. Rising tides lift all boats. That's so powerful. That is
Yeah,
so powerful.
I did hear that somewhere else, and I think it's relevant to a lot of different movements. You know, like it's about lifting people up with you, educating people with you, taking them on a journey with you, as opposed to sort of trying to, you know, set yourself apart. It's like we're all in this kind of work together.
This is power. Wait. Let's see. Everyone's like, it's a team effort. Beth said used those same paper packing in boxes to wrap gifts instead of buying plastic lined wrapping paper.
That's a
Thank
fantastic.
you, Faithful to Nature.
So you can go back on our Instagram and we have some suggestions for how you can use our paper for Christmas wrapping. And wrapping doesn't just have to be for Christmas. So please reuse it.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I wanted to just share it because it just reminds us birthdays come around, there's lots of gifts that we give, and we have options to reuse what we already have.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, Zandi, it has been absolutely amazing to chat to you. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's really been great to pick your brain about sustainability and to hear what you have to say. I think it's been a really fascinating conversation. I'd also like to say thanks for everyone that's tuned in. It's been really great to see your comments. It's been so interesting. Oh, and there's another suggestion, using your boxes when moving, the FTN boxes. They're pretty strong, so they're good for moving.
Yes.
So thanks to everyone who's tuned in and listened. Thanks for all of your comments, guys. Thanks for those of you that dropped questions. We are going to be doing a few more of these lives on a few more trend topics. So please keep an eye on our Instagram. We'll be telling you more. We're going to be looking at clean beauty. We're going to be looking at metabolic health. We're going to be looking at hormonal health. So there's a lot of topics we're going to be discussing, but I'm really excited that we got to kick off about sustainability, because it really is something that's so near and dear to us at Faithful to Nature. And I couldn't think of anybody better to have this conversation with. Zandi, thank you for joining us.
Lorna, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everybody who's joined. I love the idea that we're learning together. And that's so powerful because community is everything. So thank you for having me. And I'm grateful to be part of the humans that are starting off the conversations to be had. I'm here for the hormonal health. I'm going to be tuning in for that. And it's again, we're learning together. So I'm really excited for the topics, the trends that you are focusing on. So yay.
Thank you so much, Zandi. Keep well, and cheers everyone. See you on Thursday. Cheers.
Cheers.